This presentation tonight is about attracting native birds to your home and other ways that you can live a bird-friendly life. So I'm John DeLuca, and I'll share my contact information later on. Feel free to take photos of the slides for those that are here in person, and feel free to take screenshots if you're out there online, because I'll have some tips for you on some bird-friendly landscaping. You might want to keep some notes. What's going on?
I want to try to record it.
Oh, I think it's recording.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Gordon, it is recording and we will put it online as a YouTube, John, so people can refer.
Oh boy, I'm very famous. All right. Okay. So let's see if this keeps rolling. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so an outline for the presentation. We'll talk about bird-friendly landscaping, then water features, nest boxes and feeders, keeping birds and pets safe, citizen science initiatives that you can participate in, and resources for future reading and watching. So first, bird-friendly landscaping. Habitat in general equals food plus water plus shelter. That's a real simple lesson that we give to kids in conservation education, and it applies, you know, working as a wildlife biologist too, or working as somebody in your own backyard trying to make a bird-friendly yard. So it's good to think about things in these kind of three bins: food, water, and shelter. So, and some basic principles for bird-friendly landscaping. You know, provide for a really diverse structure and a diverse set of bloom times, the whole phenology of flowering periods, so that way you get flowers and fruits and seeds across a large portion of the calendar year. Trees, shrubs, hedgerows, flowers, grasses, ferns, those all contribute to the structural diversity. And, you know, structural and compositional diversity, or by composition I mean the number of species, that will beget species richness of birds. You'll have more bird species too if you have a more diverse structure and composition to your landscaping. It's good to embrace the wild side. A lot of people want everything clean and neat. You know, like they like to have a manicured lawn. They like to have, you know, their box elders so square and everything. Embrace a little mess, you know, first to your home. We'll start with an outline here: bird-friendly landscaping, water features, nest boxes and feeders, keeping birds and pets safe, citizen science, and additional resources. We'll start with bird-friendly landscaping. Now, you guys are seeing the slides change now, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So habitat equals food plus water plus shelter. And some basic principles are to provide for diverse structure and bloom times, a diversity of vegetation types, trees, shrubs, hedgerows, flowers, grasses, ferns. That will beget a diversity of wildlife, including birds. It's good to embrace the wild side. Don't go for the manicured English garden look. Go for more semi-natural look. Snags and down logs are really important. Leaves, you know, letting your lawn grow up and not keeping it down all the time. Like back in Eugene, where I used to have a home, I would only mow my lawn like 4 times a year. So that and the birds loved it. I had so many birds in the backyard, especially, you know, your finches and sparrows. Brush piles are great, like keeping some brush piles around. You know, you don't have to have them up front, you keep them in the back, but you know, your towies will love that sort of thing. Using curves in your landscaping instead of straight lines. That provides for more protective cover for birds and other animals as they escape predators, little hiding nooks and things. It's good to plant in groups instead of planting one species of plant and then another of a different species, planting a few of the same type. Pruning lightly, so like letting dried seed heads just be, especially over winter. That's great for bees and other insects, which provide food for birds. And you know, bees providing their pollinator services, and they contribute to your flowers, and those flowers will contribute to your hummingbirds. And keeping those berries intact as a food source for things like waxwings. Dead flower stalks and other dead vegetation also provides protective cover from predators. Okay, logistics. So it's important to think about how you're going to plant before you start planting, and have a good plan in place. Otherwise, all your plantings can just die. So you got to choose the right plant for the right place. You know, is it a wet or dry spot on your property? Is it sunny? Is it shady? I like to choose plants that don't need watering after establishment. Usually you have to water things in for the first few years. On the west side, it was great to plant in the fall because you get a lot of water. Out here, I'm not sure, you know, so plant this. I borrowed this presentation from one that I gave to the Lane County Audubon, but I've modified it for here. So take that third bullet with a grain of salt. It's good to mix in compost when you're planting. On top of your compost, you can put cardboard and mulch. A lot of people call that like sheet mulching or lasagna mulching. You're going to need water for the first 2 to 3 summers. It's great to shop at local natives and always ask, is it native to this area? And it's great to take notes, you know, like in a little notebook, draw out what your plants where and write down which species, and maybe even tag your plants so that you have ideas to share with friends. And if you want to plant more of it later, you know what you planted. And this is that idea of lasagna or sheet mulching. You've got the earth on the bottom, you know, your ground. You cut down your lawn, that's that green layer there, the next layer up. Then they've got manure and some cardboard on top of that. You can use straw. I wouldn't use hay because that would, you know, that often has seeds in it. Then compost on top of that, and then straw on top of that. You can get compost for next to nothing from the landfill here. It's very cheap and it's great stuff. It's not a bad idea to use weed cloth. If you've got real weed problems, and you can poke holes and put your plants in there. I like drip irrigation tubing. I've got an illustration of that. That makes for a really water efficient garden. And then the bottom right, that shows you some other ways you can do it. But you know, using drip irrigation is a great way to go with a timer. You can set it and forget it. And let's see. Yes, plants matter. So you want to plant plants that provide food and plant plants that provide shelter. So food, you can have nectar plants, seeds, nuts, berries, foliage, pollen, insects. It provides all those things. Shelter, you know, that provides protective cover from predators. Native birds prefer native plants in general, so it's good to go native often. And they often are much easier to maintain because they're adapted to this climate. Exotic plants can often bring problems and become noxious weeds. And sometimes they require active management. Here on the bottom, I have things that it's good to know their identification. And if they pop up on your property, or you see them out when you're hiking around, report to the local botanist at whatever public land management entity that might be. Reed canary grass, English ivy, blackberry, Scotch broom, knapweed, orange hawkweed is becoming a real problem. Perennial pea vine, burr buttercup, puncture vine. These are all worth Googling and looking at, or searching on the web and finding out what they look like and getting rid of them. Definitely not planting them. A lot of people will plant English ivy. It's just a real bane of botanists' existence. And if you want to see some native plants, there's urban landscaping with native plants on 4/28/2022. I have a more proper advertisement for this in a later slide. I don't know why that popped up there. So on to trees. Native trees that are really good are beaked hazelnut, western dogwood, black hawthorn. These all produce berries. And then some other native trees that are great, ponderosa pine. You know, those are great for white-headed woodpeckers, Lewis's woodpeckers. Vine maple, our native alders, for example, gray or red. Chinkapin can grow into a tree form. Aspen and cottonwood are fantastic for birds, but they're not so good for water pipes, so be careful where you plant them. But birds love them. Non-native and non-invasive fruits can be great too. I just planted 8 fruit trees. I moved to Bend about a year and a half ago, and I'm so excited this spring. Plums, cherries, apricots, nectarines, apples, pears, peaches. You know, as that fruit falls on the ground, there's a little bit here and there. The birds will peck at it, and it's a free bird feeder, you know. Hedgerow trees, some good hedgerow trees that are native: incense cedar, lodgepole pine, Douglas fir, western juniper. Then there's more too. This is just a sampling. And here's some photos. We've got dogwood in the top left, vine maple in the bottom left, chinkapin in the top right. Cascara is a wonderful berry producing tree. I don't think I mentioned it in the slide, but birds love that one too. Native shrubs, onto shrubs. We talked about trees. Now these shrubs are going to provide nectar, insects, fruit, shelter. Our native evergreen shrubs, manzanita, snowbrush ceanothus, Oregon grape, big sagebrush, purple sage. These are all great ones. Native deciduous shrubs that are great, blue or red elderberry. They produce wonderful berries that you can make elderberry wine out of too, if you want some for yourself. Red flowering currant, wax currant, golden currant, twin berry, bitter cherry, choke cherry, mock orange, serviceberry, native raspberry, Nootka rose, thimbleberry, spirea, serviceberry, red stem ceanothus. Oh, I got cascara in here because it can be kind of shrubby too. And non-native and non-invasive plants that are great for shrubs include rosemary, culinary sage, lavender. You get culinary lavender too, and that's another twofer. It's good for the birds and the bees, and also good for people, you know, for cooking and making sachets out of or whatever else. And let's see here. On the top left, we've got big sage. Then we've got, oh, I don't know what that is. I forget which one that is. Who knows that one? Is that an alder? I'm not sure. And then we've got manzanita here, and then Oregon grape in the bottom left. Here's blue elderberry, snowbrush. And for ground cover, so we've talked about trees, shrubs. Now working it down to the ground cover. Remember the structural diversity we were talking about. Native evergreens for ground cover, kinnikinnick, great. Mahalamat, pine mat, manzanita, pussy toes. Native deciduous ground cover that's really good is woodland strawberry, wild strawberry, Oregon wood sorrel, and non-native, non-invasive ones, you know, would be your domestic strawberries, creeping thyme, and here we've got kinnikinnick with its flower, and this is some kind of wild strawberry, and then we've got the wood sorrel on the bottom right. And then our herbaceous plants, you know, your grasses and forbs. So I'm just focusing on the forbs piece of that, but scarlet gilia is a really good one. Pex penstemon, the local native, that's beautiful. It's right here in the center right. Western red columbine up in the top left, just a gorgeous thing. Yellow monkey flower here in the top right. Paintbrush is a wonderful one. Larkspur in the left here. Pacific bleeding heart, Douglas or golden iris, and then a variety of native thistles too. The finches, especially the goldfinches, will love that. Then vines are great as well. The hummingbirds love orange honeysuckle. Western white clematis is a good one. I underlined western white because there's a noxious weed of clematis. You don't want to plant the wrong clematis. So western white's a good one. Non-native plants to consider that are not invasive include grape and hardy kiwi. And then a note again on dead trees and brush piles. A lot of people see dead trees and they don't think it's worth anything. Well, as you probably know as birders, it's really important habitat for a variety of cavity nesters. We've got dozens of cavity nesters. Bats use them. You know, all kinds of critters you'll find in standing dead trees, also known as snags. And same with brush piles. You know, people often, oh, I can get that brush pile out front and get them to haul it off. If you don't need to, leave it in the backyard. The birds will love it. Water features, nest boxes and feeders. You can add this to the mix too. So for water features, there's a variety of options. You go with a dripper, and there's an example on the top left and right of a very simple dripper. Somebody's just got a tank of water there, and they've got it wedged open just a little bit, and it's dripping a little bit of water. It doesn't have to be fancy. You could also use your drip irrigation and create a little dripper out of drip irrigation. You don't have to buy anything too fancy at all. A bird bath is good. You can make your own bird baths. You don't need to buy those necessarily. You go to the thrift store and make one. Fountains are good. Moving water is best. Best to keep it a ½ inch to 1 inch deep. It's best to keep it 10 feet from cover. That way the birds aren't getting set up to be whacked by the local house cats if you've got a problem with house cats out and about, or if you've got a Cooper's hawk, maybe you want to keep it away from the stealth predators like those accipiters. And here's just some inspiration for all kinds of wild bats you could make yourself going to the thrift store and having at it. Nest boxes. So it's good to have ventilation holes at the top. A lot of people forget about that, but especially in the hot summer, you're going to want that so the birds don't cook in there. Drainage holes are good to have so the young nestlings don't drown out. Different diameter holes are good for different birds. And I'll have a list there that you can take a screen capture of in the next slide. No perches, I would recommend. Perches are good for house wrens. That's about it. So if you want a house wren, that's good too, but you could also put off a sock probably, and they'll mess with anything. And then always clean your houses in the wintertime to prevent spreading of insects and disease to the birds. And then these are some dimensions here, nest box dimensions and placement recommendations for common birds of the Pacific Northwest. We've got kestrels, barn owls, chickadees, downy and hairy woodpeckers, house wrens, flickers, owls, martins, nuthatches, swallows, bluebirds, wood ducks, etc. All kinds of exciting wood nest boxes you can make. And then feeders. So a note on feeders. People love feeders, but I would say only use them if you're going to use them safely. Otherwise, you're really doing birds a disservice. And to use them safely, we'll go through that. So it's good to have a weather dome to avoid toxic molds. Might not be as much of a problem in dry Central Oregon, but still a good practice. 10 feet from low shrubs, again, to prevent predators from getting the birds. It's best to clean twice per month with a 1 to 10 bleach water mix. Cleaning around the base of the feeders to avoid rat infestations. That's better for you than the birds, really. Tube feeders are better than hopper feeders in general, but hopper feeders aren't bad. You don't have to avoid them. Peanut and suet feeders are great for woodpeckers, nuthatches, and more. And then nectar feeders, of course, are great for hummingbirds. And sometimes you'll get other birds at the nectar feeders as well. So with feeders, avoid milo and sorghum, millet, cracked corn, weed seeds. All these are often discarded and they attract rats and pigeons, starlings, and house sparrows, things that you're not going to want. Some choices that are good are black oil sunflower seeds, and chickadees, doves, finches, grosbeaks, nuthatches, siskins, and woodpeckers will like that. Niger thistle is really great for juncos, goldfinches, buntings, and siskins. Safflower seed is really great for doves and finches. Striped sunflower seed is a popular favorite among chickadees, jays, doves, grosbeaks, nuthatches, and woodpeckers. Peanuts are great for woodpeckers, chickadees, nuthatches, and jays. It's also good to squirrel-proof your feeder, and you can search the web on different designs for how to squirrel-proof, and I'm sure the local bird store has some good squirrel-proofing stuff too. Hummingbird feeders, again, only use them if you're going to use them safely. A big part of that is don't put up a hummingbird feeder going from fall into winter if you're not going to maintain it all winter, because you're luring hummingbirds to stick around in a place that they think is habitat, and then it turns out you pull the rung out from under them and they're not going to do so hot. So if you're going to do it going fall into winter, keep it going all the way to spring and summer. Otherwise, pull it before migration starts. No need to add coloring. In fact, coloring is not a good thing. You could make your own mix. You don't need to buy it. 1 part table sugar to 4 parts water. That's it. So you have to boil up the water, put the sugar in, and then you have to let it cool down. You got your solution. You'll definitely want to clean and refill to avoid mold, bacteria, and disease every 2 to 3 days during the hot weather, and then once per week during winter. Keeping birds safe. So one thing to keep birds safe is to provide them shelter. Remember, food plus water plus shelter. That's all birds really need, just like all other wildlife. Well, shelter on the wintering grounds we often don't think about when they're, for our neotropical migrants. They're going down to Central America, South America, and they are most going to benefit if you're drinking bird-friendly coffee as opposed to conventional coffee. If you don't know, coffee was originally grown under shaded canopy, and then over time, industrialization allowed for the creation of coffee that grows in full sun. That is the coffee that you get when you buy cheap coffee. When you buy really good organic coffee and little rainforest certified, or even better, Smithsonian certified bird-friendly coffee. It's a great wedding gift too. I got it for my brother and sister-in-law, a subscription to Smithsonian bird-friendly coffee. When you buy that bird-friendly coffee, what you're buying is habitat for the birds too, because you've got coffee plants providing that shrub cover, right? And then above that, you'll have multiple layers, especially if you go with that Smithsonian certified, then you do hard 3 layers of canopy. Rainforest friendly is good too. It's better than nothing. But you know, you can see the difference between in this illustration between bird-friendly coffee and technified coffee. So if you're a coffee drinker, consider the source and get something that looks like that habitat there on the right. Really complex habitat, right? And I put a picture here of this bird. I went to Costa Rica recently on vacation and found this endemic bird species called Cabanis ground sparrow. It's only found in central Costa Rica. It's endemic to that portion of the country. And it's a shrub-loving bird, but you don't really find it unless you go to places that have a little bit of canopy. And guess where I found it? In a bird-friendly coffee plantation. It was really cool, and it really brought home the message to me of the importance of drinking that. And also, if you like our warblers, our tanagers, our grosbeaks, all the things that you see coming in, flycatchers, whatever else coming in the spring and summer, you're providing habitat for our native birds here in the States as well. Another thing to keep birds safe, bird-friendly windows. Each year, about 600 million birds die from just flying into windows. That's astounding. And it's easy to remedy. All you got to do is buy some decals. Now, if you don't want colorful decals on your window, that's okay. There's some decals, as you can see in the bottom right. What we see is on the top, and what the birds see is on the bottom. Because a lot of birds, well, not a lot. Birds see in different spectra than we do. They all do. So they see the world differently, including colors. So you can get some clear-ish decals that you hardly see, like those in the bottom right. It's no problem. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't want that. It's gonna make my window look ugly. But it doesn't have to be colorful. It can be out of sight, out of mind. Avoiding pesticides is another measure to keep birds safe, especially insecticides. And especially within insecticides, neonicotinoids. Looking for systemic in the label is a good thing to avoid. And these are a bunch of pesticides that are pretty nasty. Acetaminoprid. Oh, I'm not gonna even try and pronounce all these, but you can see them up on the slide. Feel free to take a shot. You know, I'm not saying don't ever use pesticides. With Armenian blackberry, if you want to get rid of it, you're probably going to need to cut it in the fall and dab some pesticide on the stem, or just keep pulling it and pulling it every year after year after year. You know, in general, it's best to avoid them because especially these neonics, they bioaccumulate, they go up the food web. It's more and more being found to be a problem. They can have cumulative and irreversible effects, and they can kill off the prey base, especially the insecticides. And a lot of them are persistent in the environment, especially systemic ones. Definitely want to avoid rat poison for your raptors and your foragers, your owls. You know, often with rat poison, the rodents will be poisoned and they're just kind of lolling around before they die, and something nabs them and they get poisoned. Avoiding herbicides is another good one. Using vinegar, dish soap, boiling water, and corn gluten, those are all alternatives. And then I put for rat poison, it is good to use traps for rats and cover your compost. Those are ways to avoid having rats. And this is just kind of an illustration of the problem with neonicotinoids. A lot of seeds can be covered in it, and the birds can eat the seed, and that can kill a songbird. And then even the neonics on the seeds, it actually goes into the plant. It stays persistent, and then it goes into the flower, and then pollinators will get it, and then it goes into the bees and or other insects that are on that, and then birds that are eating those insects. It just bioaccumulates. So that's what I mean. It's persistent in the environment up the food web. Real problem. Some resources to check out on your own. This was the advertisement I was mentioning earlier. Native plants in the urban landscape. One of our botanists on the Deschutes National Forest is going to be presenting this open to the public on April 28th from 1 to 3. And she's going to have a second offering on April 30th at 10 a.m. It's at the Bend Fort Rock Ranger District Office at 63095 Deschutes Market Road in Bend. And it should be great, learning the basics of incorporating native plants into your own yard. We have a native plant garden there. And Marlo has a lot of practical experience from her own failures and successes. And then on the right, I have a little advertisement for a botanist who's leading Skull Hollow Campground Restoration Pod on the Crooked River National Grassland on April 28th. They're going to meet at the campground parking lot at 9. You'll notice there's a conflict, so if you want to make both, then you'll want to go to the 30th for the urban landscape one. And they'll be discussing this improvement project for the campground area, their work on managing invasive plants, and using native plants and restoration efforts, and their upcoming vision for a pollinator garden. These are some excellent resources for you. In the background, I've got the Oregon Flora page. It's oregonflora.org/garden. It's a great place to help you choose. You can pick from different combinations, a pollinator garden, if you want a woodland garden, all different options for native plants. Then in the middle left there, that's the Native Plant Society of Oregon's website. And that's another great one. So it's great, Google that, Native Plant Society of Oregon. You can find all the native plant nurseries. So you're like wondering, well, where do I get connected? Where do I get all these things? That's the place to go. And then this is a really fun guide, especially for the birders among us, maintaining and improving habitat for hummingbirds in Oregon and Washington, a land manager's guide. This is targeted towards all kinds of land managers, including if you have your own property, just your own yard. It doesn't have to be a big allotment. The Xerces Society, XERCES, they have wonderful resources too for planting pollinator-friendly vegetation in your yard. This is a wonderful illustration I just love about, the principles here. Fallow fields, hedgerows, et cetera, what to do with these different components. They kind of break it all up into those different structures here on this diagram and provide all kinds of ideas of what to do in those different components of your property. And then another thing you can do to live a bird-friendly life is contribute to citizen science. And there's a volunteer opportunity. This is your ranger district. It just so happens. To sign up, please contact me. I am going to be resuming operations at a bird banding station. We're going to be running the Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survivorship Protocol, or MAPS. That's the international network of stations. We all use the same standardized protocol, and that way we can gather up our data into one centralized database that the Institute for Bird Populations manages. And that helps them understand demographic trends in bird populations. Point counts are great, breeding bird surveys are great, Christmas bird counts are great, but those are great for understanding occupancy, presence and absence, or density, number of birds. MAPS allows us to understand reproductive success and year-to-year survivorship from banding birds and recapturing birds at station year after year after year. And it's getting pretty exciting too. If funding permits, I plan to start what's called a MODIS station, M-O-T-U-S, where we put these MODIS tags on birds, and we have MODIS receivers across the landscape on a grid. And if I get funding for this, then I'll have these 300-acre areas where we'll know where the birds are moving and how they're responding to different treatments on the landscape, be it thinning the forest, prescribed fire, restoring wetlands, whatever it might be. And so this is kind of the layout of the duties. If you're interested in this, if you're going to be helping with net opening or extracting birds, You have to arrive at the station 50 minutes prior to sunrise. We'll be working for about 8 hours total. Every 40 minutes we go on a net run and check all the nets. And basic requirements are being able to speed walk 1 mile on flat terrain in under 15 minutes, and being able to do that on 40-minute intervals for about 8 miles per day. So it's a lot of work for sure. You're just walking all day. It's all speed walking if you're in a busy airport. And you have to be available on all 7 dates. I'm operating for 7 dates between late May and early August. So I require that level of commitment because it takes a lot of time and energy to train folks. And when I'm training, I'm not extracting birds, so it's a bird safety thing, just as much as anything else. There's also need for data recorders, and eventually I'm going to be doing some conservation education. This year, I'm just focusing on getting the station running and smooth before I add that component. But it's a wonderful thing. This is from the map station that I ran on the west side when I worked for the Northwest Oregon District of the Bureau of Land Management. And does anybody know what this bird is? It's not an east side bird. It's kind of a quiz bird to keep you guys engaged. It's a wren tit. They're so fun. They're really cute. They're fun to check out when you go on the west side. And then another thing you can do is get on eBird and especially include your observations. It's going to include all birds you see, so the data is more useful to Cornell, the lab of ornithology. But it's great to search the web for partners and flight watch lists. I just put a few up here that are really of concern: Rufous hummingbird, evening grosbeak, Lewis's woodpecker. These are the percentage declines in those species since 1966. Not doing too good, especially the grosbeak. Isn't that terrible? 92% decline since 1966. And it used to be a very plentiful bird, I understand. I'm relatively, young. I wasn't around in the 60s and 70s, but apparently it was all over the place. And now you don't see them as much, I hear. I certainly don't think they're a very common bird. But it's great to go on ebird.org. It's getting more and more user-friendly. They have an app for the phone that's super user-friendly, even if you're a little gun-shy with technology and all that. I encourage it. It's a great way to put your birding to use, to make it contribute to science. And it's a great way to find more birds because you can explore the data and see what's been seen where. And you can keep track of your lists for free. What your month list is, your year list, your county list, all that stuff. I didn't used to be that kind of a lister, but now I am by default because I always eBird. And it's a nice online community of birders too. And that is it. So, do you all have any questions here in the audience or out there in Zoom land?
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you tell us about the festival in Sisters?
Oh, well, Gordon might be able to tell you about that, or somebody else. The festival in Sisters, the Woodpecker Festival.
Oh, yes. That is our signature event of the year. You go to the East Cascades Audubon Society webpage, and there's a tab for the Dean Hale Woodpecker Festival. And you can read the description of the trips, and then there's a registration button. There are a few left, a few trips, so I'd say get on the website and check it out. It's mainly what we do is guided field trips, and the one exception is our guest speaker, Steve Shunk, on the Saturday evening. Stop sharing. Very good.
Gordon, you might mention the number of woodpeckers.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's approximately 11 species, is that right? 11 of 22 woodpeckers in North America, somewhere in that range, 20, yeah. So this is woodpecker heaven here.
Yes.
Any questions for John?
One of the slides that went by pretty quickly, in the pesticide, herbicide category, there was something about oil-based lubricants.
Oh, we can bring it back up. Let's see,
Sure.
where is that? Right here.
And I didn't know what that one meant.
Let me see what I have in there. I might have said pests instead of pets.
Ah, so it was a chemical, that was just- Veterinary ointments to control fleas.
Yeah. Yes, 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 yeah, yep. Mhm, mhm. That one. So, yeah, it's if you have, so insect sprays, seed treatments, soil drenches, tree injections, and veterinary ointments to control fleas. Yes. So some of those things can rub off on the environment if you have an outdoor animal. But it's worth reading more into. I have to admit, full disclosure, I made this presentation quite a little while ago.
Like rub into the back of the pet's neck, is that what we're talking about there?
Yes, I think so. I think so. Yeah, I think so. Mhm. And then with tree injections, a lot of those include neonicotinoids. Any other questions?
Well, I've got a question.
Yes.
There's always a trade-off in making your yard more natural, bird-friendly, animal-friendly, and what I want as a human.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
In particular, last year I had some cherries that were doing just fine, and the dang finches ate every one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Bird netting.
Well, and you can also, for fruit trees, you can put out a little owl decoy. That, of course, is going to scare the birds away a little bit there. Or you can have calls going every once in a while with raptors. But you're going to end up scaring some things away. But you can also pay nature's tax and let them have some. But netting is good. But if you do netting, you'll want to be careful. Make sure the netting is very visible to the birds so they don't get tangled up in it. And I don't use netting myself because I've heard too many horror stories of birds getting caught up in it. There's other creative solutions that aren't necessarily pretty. You can use like chicken wire or hog wire, something like that. Or not hog wire, welding wire. Yeah.
Well, the other thing is we do live in a desert and things like fruit trees, human consumption of fruit trees brings a lot of water to
Mm-hmm.
make that fruit.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's a very good point.
Well, I listened to a talk, a friend of mine who's from the East Coast, and he talks about promoting native plants in particular, which is a bigger issue in the more developed parts of our country. But his advice was, well, get rid of your lawn. And but I really like green grass. I said, well, get rid of half of it, or get rid of just 10% of it. Just do something.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also native, if you're a fan of grasses, there's a lot of beautiful native bunch grasses that require much less water. And that are really, what's that?
I don't even water, they just grow all over the place.
Yeah. So sometimes you can establish without even having the water. Usually it's best to establish stuff with some water. I said I planted all those fruit trees, but my take on it is after the first 3 years of watering, I'm done watering. If it dies, it dies. But oftentimes they'll hang on. Some of them, I have an old apple tree in my yard that I inherited, for example. Any other questions or
Any questions out in Zoom land? Do I see a
information overload?
Well, it's a good thing we're recording. It'll be up on the website. People can go back and watch it YouTube. So, I see a chat going on here. Lots of questions in the chat.
Oh, there might be questions in the chat. I'm looking at map.
Whoops, let me make sure. There we go. Yeah.
Will you change the screen?
Birds, yes.
Yeah, ABC, that'd be American Bird Conservancy.
And we got a website. ABC, American Bird Conservancy, yeah.
I put that in there. This is
Yeah.
Elise.
A YouTube link on our website, so people can check it out later.
How come I'm not-
Okay, this was,
That's
there.
back.
We're going back, okay, good,
Okay.
good, I think we'll, call it an evening, thank you,
Okay.
John.
Yeah,
Really
my
appreciate it.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.